Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Mary Claire Haver, and I'm here to talk to you about fuel refocusing and macros, and also give you a tutorial for an app that you can use online in order to help you calculate your macros. So I get a lot of questions about how different we are than a traditional keto program. And in a nutshell, a keto program is fat at any cost, weight loss at any cost. If you follow a keto plan, you definitely will lose weight. However, you're probably, if you're following the traditional way, not paying attention to the ratio of saturated to unsaturated fats, you're probably going to end up with tremendous amounts of inflammation. As a matter of fact, there's a great study out there that looked at all-cause mortality. So all causes of death, didn't matter what it was, and the percentage of carbohydrates that people ate in their diet. And it seemed like we have we have our X and Y axis. And if we plot percentage of carbohydrates on the bottom and risk of death, there's a U-shaped curve. So people who had an ultra high carb diet, as we know, have an increased risk of death. And people who have a ultra low carb, as in traditional keto plan, also have an equally high risk of death. So that's a little scary. It seems like the sweet spot was somewhere in the 40 to 55% range of carbohydrates as a percentage of calories for your best health. However, when they broke down the low carb and they looked at saturated versus unsaturated fats, those that had a balance where they had more unsaturated fat, like 1.5 times more unsaturated fat versus saturated fats in the low carb, high fat diet, that U shape started turning back flat. You actually lost that death rate. So when we're in Galveston diet, we do adjust our macronutrients to accelerate weight loss, but we try to do it in as healthy a weight as possible. And then as we reach our goal weights, we start shifting those macros back into the bottom of that U-shaped curve. So hopefully that explains that for you. The second reason we do fuel refocusing is breaking the physical and psychological addiction to simple carbohydrates and added sugars. It is a real, definite addiction problem in this country. Sugar is more, in lab rats, sugar is more addictive than cocaine. There's multiple studies demonstrating that after a sugar load, people are going to make really poor health decisions, which will lead to filling your body. You get depressed and you fill your body with more carbohydrates, and it just lends itself into this negative cycle. So part of the function of the fuel refocusing is learning to do without the added sugars and the simple carbohydrates, and breaking those psychological and physical addictions, because we're training our bodies to rely on more fat and protein than carbohydrates as we have ever in the past, so that we can break those bonds that hold us so very tightly. So when we look at the Galveston diet holistically, it is nothing to do with calories. People write to me and there's like, am I getting enough calories? Is this too many calories? I don't know about calories. And I'm like, stop counting calories. Stop. There's no need. In the Galveston diet, we only look at macros. So to break it down, what is a macro? A macronutrient is carbohydrates, protein, and fat, okay? The three things your body can use for fuel, okay? Ethanol is another, I wouldn't call it a nutrient, but it has to be converted to fat to be utilized for energy, so we won't count ethanol. But there are calories in alcohol, so you cannot have them during your fast, for those of you who asked. Okay, so we're looking at protein, fat, and carbohydrates. What we're doing in the Galveston diet is we are training our bodies to break the addiction to simple sugars and added and simple carbohydrates, and utilize fat stores more for energy, and the fat in our diets more for energy. We're keeping our proteins neutral. We are very careful about the fats we put in our body. It is not the butter and bacon keto. It is not a fat free-for-all. It is not whatever fat, however you can get it, is okay, because we know that long-term, one, people can't sustain it, two, it's unhealthy in the long run. We are very focused on making sure you get a balance of plant-based versus animal-based fats. Now, not all plant-based fats are unsaturated. For example, coconut oil is saturated. So it's more to do with the saturation of the fat than the source that it comes from. that leads to the detrimental health benefits. But again, everything in balance. You need about 1.5 times the amount of unsaturated fat versus saturated fats. Okay. So we're not counting calories, what do? We're counting macronutrients. So we are looking at the distribution of in our day. We're looking at the grams of protein we eat, the grams of fat we eat, and the grams of carbohydrate we eat, and then we're going to plot those out. Remember that protein and carbohydrates have 4 grams per 4 calories per gram, and fat, of course, is more. And so when we're looking at the percentage of where we're getting our nutrition from, we're shooting for, and it doesn't have to be perfect, about 70% healthy fats, a 20% protein, and about a 10% carbohydrate. That will accelerate your weight loss. It's difficult because, one, we come from a low-fat generation where we've always been taught low fat is the way to go. Well, it turns out that that's bunk. There's no truth in that. Definitely a high diet high in saturated fats can be detrimental, but a diet high in unsaturated and healthy fats is actually very, very healthy. And we've been conditioned to count calories our whole life. Well, not all calories are created equal. You can't fight Newton's law of thermodynamics, calories in, calories out energy. That still works in a laboratory, but our bodies are much more complex than a petri dish or a test tube. Our bodies have hormones. Our bodies have temperature variations. Our bodies have all these different things that are affected by the type of food we eat. So we're going to stop focusing on the quantity of food that we eat, and we're going to focus on the quality of food. Because what happens in the diets that are just calorically restrictive, we end up eating low calories, but the calories we're eating are super unhealthy. We're eating out of bags and boxes. We're eating processed things because we're just counting calories. We don't care. I can't tell you how many times I would go to work and see a coworker who was following a very popular, very, very popular and successful plan for most in their 20s and 30s. That is based on calorie restriction, and they'd eat a tiny bag of goldfish. This has this many points, okay, I think, but that has so many chemicals, additives, processed carbohydrates, things, there's almost nothing healthy in there. The only thing that's remotely healthy are micronutrients that are added back in because they were stripped away. When you'd be way better off eating a whole fruit or a whole vegetable for that carbohydrate, for those same amount of calories. So you get to break up the calories, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to use a web-based app called Chronometer. Many of you also use Carb Manager, and I have this in the Galveston Diet tutorial. I have a whole separate video on how to use a Carb Manager app. But I've been experimenting with this new app, and because it's web-based, I'm going to take you out there to show you what I'm talking about. So we're going to look at the Mary Claire Parfait. A very typical way for me to break my fast and how I would put that in. So when I first started Galveston Diet, and those of you who are confused with macros, I will walk you through it. I started figuring out what I was going to eat for the entire day. And then I would make sure my macros were as balanced as possible. Then I would add things in or out to make sure my macros ended up where I wanted them to be. And that's what I ate that day. Okay. If you do it on the fly, it's going to be much harder. If you plan and prepare, it's going to be very, very easy. Okay, so let me share my screen. Let's go to Chronometer. Okay, so I'm going to log in. Hopefully my password is saved here. Yeah, okay, log in. All right, so this one is on the new-ish side to me. Okay, so I'm going to add a food. See this button here? We're going to add a food, and I'm going to add in my Greek yogurt plain. It's going to be I usually just pick the Faye 5%. Let's see if we can find the 5%. That's the full fat. Okay. Chobani Greek yogurt, original plain whole milk, 5% milk fat. Okay. We're going to go with that. All right. So the serving is 1 cup, but actually I usually do half a cup. So I'm going to do 0.5 cup. Okay. So I'm going to add that. If you look down here on the calorie summary, you have your carbs, you have protein, carbs, and then you have your fats. It's already popping up here, okay? I am going to add my walnuts. And I'm going to do a quarter cup, 0.25, whoops, for that. Okay. See my fats starting to come around, carbs and protein. So my proteins are at 20, my carbs are at 11, and my fats are at 69. That is pretty balanced within the Galveston diet. But I want some berries. I want to balance this out some more. And so if you look here, it'll do your macronutrients here, your protein, 17%, 4%, 43. Those are set throughout the day. Again, we don't really look at calories. We're really just looking at this circle here to see if we can get the balance right, because we're not counting calories. So I'm going to add some raspberries, raw. So I'm going to do a quarter cup of that too. Okay. Again, fat 66%, protein 19%, and carbs 15%. Still really, really good. I tend to add some flax seeds. And let's say 1 tablespoon chopped. Add. Okay, so now we're at 66% fat, 19% protein, and 16% carbs. Still really, really good. We're also getting 6.1 grams of fiber, and we're getting iron, calcium, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin B, and folate. Okay, if you look down, it's also giving us an omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So our omega-3s are at 4.3, and our omega-6 are at 11.6. Remember that ideally you should have 1-to-1, but that is really, really hard to do without supplementation. 3-to-1 to 4-to-1 is probably okay. So we are hitting about 3-to-1 here, which is still really, really good. Let's see. And then you can also look at your monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. Here, 27 grams of fat total, but we are looking at your polyunsaturated of 15.9 versus your saturated of 5.6. So remember, we want at least 1.5 times the amount of unsaturated versus saturated fat, and this is helping us hit that between the walnuts and the flax seeds. So again, this is a really, really healthy way to go. So that was how I broke my fast. So let's say for dinner, I'm going to have some salmon. We're going to have wild cooked salmon. We're going to go with a 4-ounce serving. Add. Let's have some asparagus. Cooked from fresh. Let's throw a little butter on that. So let's say we're going to have 5 medium spears. Okay. And let's add a little olive oil. We're going to cook the asparagus with a tablespoon of olive oil, and then we're going to top it with like a 1/2 tablespoon of butter. Okay, so look here. So now we've got our parfait, and we've got some salmon and asparagus that we have cooked. And say the olive oil and butter also help cook the asparagus as well. So we've got 65% fat, 9% carbs, and 26% protein. Still doing really, really well. We've got 7.6 grams of fiber. We've got 3.4 grams of iron. You can look at all your micronutrients. And here, because we added in the extra salmon, our omega-3s went up. Now it's 2-to-1, which is still really, really good. And again, our polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats are rocking it versus our saturated. So, you know, we've got some wiggle room there. We can throw in a cheese stick, so we can look at some snacking options. So let's do some cucumbers. Heck, we can do a whole cucumber. How about that? 1 large. Add. Okay. And then let's add in still a little Parmesan. I like some Parm crisps myself. The nice thing about Parmesan is they have very little lactose in them. So those of you who are, have varying degrees of lactose intolerance, this may be a really nice option for you. So let's do half a serving. That's 10 crisps. That's pretty much. Okay, so now we're at 62% fat. We are at 25% protein, and we're at 13% carbohydrates. Still really good. We've got 11 grams of fiber, 4.3 grams of iron. We've got our calcium, all of these delicious, fabulous nutrients here. Remember, our omega-3 to omega-6 ratios are still good. And look at all the protein. We have a nice mixture of all of our amino acids here. Every single one of them is represented. We've got, all of our minerals, our main minerals are represented, and our vitamins, okay? So we are, so this is basically how you set it up. The only thing I'm really paying attention to, I'm not really looking at calories, I'm looking at this circle here, saying consumed. I'm looking at the percentage of protein. We're shooting for roughly 20, it's 25, that's fine. You can add in a little fat here and there, maybe some more nuts. Let's add some seeds, okay? So let's add some sunflower seeds. Let's go with a tablespoon, okay? So now our protein, our fats are at 63%, protein 24, and carbs at 13. Again, we're getting a little more fiber there, and our omega-3, 6 is still good, and our polyunsaturated, saturated fat ratios are fantastic. So again, this is how you do it. You're shooting for a roughly, and it does not have to be perfect, keep it within 10%, a 70, 20% protein, 70% fat, and 10% carbohydrate range. The nice thing about the Galveston diet is in the meal plans for the first 5 weeks, the days are balanced within 5% of your macronutrients. So if you just stick to the plan, you should be falling within the window of what you should be eating, and keeping your micronutrients balanced, paying attention to omega-3 and omega-6, making sure you're not going off the deep end. Remember, the standard American diet has omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of about 20:1. If we keep it under 4:1, we're doing great, okay? And your saturated to unsaturated fat, including polyunsaturated fat, you should be eating 1.5 times the amount of unsaturated fats, that's poly and un, versus saturated fat. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Hopefully that gives you some insight and will clear up some mysteries and give you a little help. So this was on Chronometer. I have a whole separate video using Carb Manager that is in the program as well. All right, everybody, I really hope this helps, gives you a little more perspective, and I'm so excited for all of you and for us to be on this journey together.